Did you ask him about recording?
Yeah.
All right. So a couple quick announcements. So first of all, next week our event or the monthly meeting is going to be at WPI. I don't think we have the exact speaker information yet, but we'll announce that on the website shortly. But just a heads up that it will be at WPI. Second, Josh just let me know there's a last minute event tomorrow for outreach if people are interested from 5 to 8 in Brookline. So reach out to Josh if you are interested.
Volunteering 5th through 8th graders, show them about lasers, light, and infrared optics. So Lincoln School. Let me know if you're interested in volunteering.
Awesome. And last but not least, I want to introduce our speaker, Kevin McComber. Kevin is the co-founder and CEO of Spark Photonics Design, a for-profit integrated photonics design services firm, and executive director of the Spark Photonics Foundation, a nonprofit STEM education, workforce development, and outreach organization. Dr. McComber previously worked at MIT in education and workforce initiatives, at Intel as a semiconductor process engineer, and in various business roles in financial services. He holds a BS and PhD degree from MIT in material science and engineering. Without further ado, Kevin, thanks for coming, and I'll let you get going.
Thanks, Will. Couldn't have said it better if I had written it myself. Yeah, so Kevin McComber, CEO and co-founder of Spark Photonics. Thank you so much for having me out tonight. I really appreciate it. Good to see so many folks in person, and excited to talk a little bit about Spark. So I didn't want to assume any kind of knowledge in integrated photonics, so I'm going to do a little bit of an intro and then kind of start talking about the company, what we do, so you know why in the world I'm here, and then talk about some things I've learned over the past 5 years running really 2 companies simultaneously. I guess just to show of hands, who here does work in photonics, like the technology, not law or kind of the business side, but more like in the tech side? Awesome. And I know we've got some patent folks in the back. Who's in kind of like the law side or the non-tech side? Awesome. And who has experience in integrated photonics? Right. So for those online, sorry, I can't really pull you, but we had 3 people raise their hand for integrated photonics. So hopefully you can get something out of the talk tonight and maybe a little bit of insight about integrated photonics, and a little bit of the business side as well. So great, that works. Okay, so my brain can't handle more than 3 things at a time, so I stick to the rule of 3. I learned this in consulting. So 3 things in the outline. I'm going to start with an introduction to our company, and then a little bit of information I've gathered as we start hiring people and look at the talent landscape. And then I actually want to wrap up with just a couple thoughts about what it's like starting a company in photonics, and pretty much have an open forum. I didn't want to presume exactly what people want to know, so I didn't want to just spend time going through slides when maybe you have a question burning in your mind. So that will be a very quick portion from me, and then I just want to throw it open and let's do open outcry questions. Feel free to jump in at any point too. Do the folks online have the ability to type in?
I'll listen on the chat and
perfect. Okay, so folks online, yeah, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and Josh will raise it up here. Okay, so since there isn't a lot of integrated photonics, I guess, experience in the room, I want to go over just a glossary of terms. By the way, can you guys see this decently well? It's pretty bright as the contrast. Okay. So starting with integrated photonics, this is shrinking photonic devices down onto the surface of the chip. Oh, yeah.
Much better. Much better.
Oh, that's mood lighting now. All right, perfect. Thanks a lot, Will. So integrated photonics, shrinking down onto a chip. And here, so I have a depiction of, on the left side, what you'd expect to see on kind of an optics bench at maybe a university or even an industry. On the right is a photonic chip. Size of a fingernail or smaller, you could get hundreds or thousands of active or passive devices on a chip. A photonic integrated circuit, or PIC, is usually used integrated, kind of interchangeably. It's just an integrated photonic circuit. So this is the standard acronym in the industry, and this is what I'm going to be using going forward. A foundry is a facility then that fabricates designs submitted by users. So we talk about fabs. These are the actual facilities. A foundry means the service to use that fab by an outside user. So if you want to get a PIC made, you can submit your design to a foundry, they'll make it and send you anywhere between one and maybe even hundreds or thousands of chips, depending on your order. Then a process design kit, or PDK, is a set of software files and documentation to help people design into foundries. You have to know what kind of layers are in the semiconductor wafer stack in order to be able to design into it. What kinds of rules are there? You know, how small can devices be on the surface of this chip? What kinds of things can overlap and what can't? So a PDK is a very critical element to a foundry's offering to the public. It's really the interface between designers and the AIM Photonics is a photonics foundry stood up by the US Department of Defense in upstate New York, started in about 2016. We're a spin out from some work that was being done there that I'll talk about in a minute. And then finally, Lucida Photonics is a PIC design software company that we partner with that you'll hear about a little bit more later. I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions about the general terms. Yes.
Will you be talking about the two cases? It's very hard to keep light in the waveguide when you bend it. So since this is so large on the fingertip, I'm thinking this is waveguide. Where if you use photonic crystals, you can bend something in a nanometer. So which level are we at? The photonic crystal level or the bent waveguide level?
Yeah, really good question. So we're talking more like the bent waveguide level. Our company doesn't do any work yet in photonic crystals, although people are looking at what's called sub-wavelength gratings, SWGs, to be able to do some of that kind of light manipulation with structures that are less than the wavelength. Thanks for the question. Anything else? All right. So just to give you an idea of what it's like, what the kind of the life cycle of a PIC is like. This is a simplified view. There could be lots of on-ramps and off-ramps, but essentially, again, rule of three. The life cycle starts with the design, right? We're designing the chip and then sending that blueprint, the final design, into the foundry for fabrication. I like to tell people, just like you can't build a house without a blueprint, you can't build a PIC without a layout. That's where we are, so that's why I put our logo there. We're only design. Spark only does design. So we're that very beginning part. And that, as you're gonna find out, is kind of a critical part of our founding story, is why we are what we are, is because we're at the very beginning. The next step then is fabrication, done through foundry service at a fabrication facility, a fab, and you get one-to-many chips. And then finally, the test and packaging, where the performance is measured. You might attach wires or attach fiber, encapsulate it, put it on the substrate, what have you. So just digging into the design portion then, 3 steps there. Component design, designing the specific devices on a chip. These could be things like waveguides, bends, splitters, modulators, interferometers. This is the design here is a 1x2 MMI to split light from one waveguide to 2. The next step is then to put those together into a circuit. The circuit would be able to be simulated as well. So we could connect them optically, connect them electrically, and then simulate what the performance is going to be. And then the final step is to take that circuit and put it into a layout. A layout, again, is that blueprint that gets sent to the foundry. So that leads us to what we do at Spark, right? And I'm going to give you a little bit of my history. Will did a great job with the intro, but I think that understanding where I come from is going to be important later. So I had a pretty non-traditional career path. Started okay with MIT undergrad, physics and material science. Got a doctorate in material science. I was not a designer. I was a fab guy. I was working in the fab at MIT, doing germanium crystallography. Didn't really ever do any design of a photonic device. Then graduated from MIT, really wanted to continue working in the fab, worked in high volume CMOS manufacturing in Chandler, Arizona, Fab 32 at Intel, which is now kind of an old fab for their standards down there. Love that job. It was really exciting. I know a lot of people in grad school think like being a process owner or something like that is going to be just sitting at a machine and watching it work, but it was the opposite of that. It was very human-centric. Machines were the kind of the part of the work, but the human side was really engaging. My wife and I had a baby. We wanted to raise him out here on the East Coast and move back to the Boston area. And I took a job. This is where it goes a little off the rails. I took a job at Liberty Mutual Insurance, but the connection was actually that this was a process engineering. So I was doing process engineering claims handling by the Special Investigations Unit, which is like their fraud investigation unit. So we were looking at how could we make fraud investigation more efficient. And we were actually implementing a big data solution to be able to look at all the indicators of fraud and kind of weed out what was the wheat from the chaff. I then moved into consulting role in the corporate strategy and research group at Liberty, where we were consulting with top management at Liberty on business issues. That was really my goal in getting into the insurance industry, was to try to get the business side, because I felt like I did so many years in tech, and I wanted to understand the business side. My old advisor at MIT, Kim Kimmerling, got word that I was kind of looking for something to get back into tech. I felt like I had enough time in the business side, I wanted to get back into tech. So he hired me on as the assistant director of what was then called AIM Photonics Academy at MIT. And this was the education and workforce development branch of AIM Photonics. So AIM Photonics was making the chips in Albany, New York. They packaged them in Rochester, but they were a couple of years old, stood up by the government, and the government realized there's not a lot of people who know how to design PICs or what to use them for, right? So they wanted someone to train mostly graduate students and incumbent professionals, often coming from the world of like electronics, on how to design and fabricate PICs. So that's what we were doing at MIT. It became really apparent, actually even before I joined, that a lot of people just don't have the time or the interest in getting trained themselves, but they still want to go into integrated photonics. So they just want someone else to do it for them, or to really hold their hand more than we could in kind of an educational setting. So I was hired into AIM Academy to start design services. And we thought maybe we can do it at MIT. It very quickly became clear we couldn't do it there because it had to be a commercial offering. So like I said, right, I was not a designer. I was a fab guy, didn't know the first thing about design. I went out and started asking everybody in the AIM network that I could get the time of day with, would you be willing to do design services for AIM? Could you help people design into AIM at all? And everybody kind of wanted to stay in their lane. It was, the academics want to stay in their tenure track position, or the companies that were working on LiDAR want to keep doing LiDAR. So it seemed like somebody should do this. I think it was the right person because I didn't know the first thing about design, but I felt like, there's a quote, to do what ought to be done, but would not be done unless I did it. I thought to be my duty. I felt like it was my duty to start something to try to address this obvious need. So left MIT in 2019 and founded Spark along with my co-founder Al, who is the chairman of Syntec Optics in Rochester, New York. He was actually looking for integrated photonic services, couldn't find them, came to MIT, and we hooked up, and the rest is Spark. So now we're actually two legal entities, Spark Photonics Design and Spark Photonics Foundation. The reason we started the foundation was we saw that there was a need for talent, because I was trying to hire a designer, right? Since I couldn't do design, I wanted to hire someone. I was looking at MIT, looking at Harvard, not a lot of people doing integrated photonics, or those who were already had job offers. So we thought, how can we start more people talking about integrated photonics to try and build an ecosystem? MIT was already doing it for grad students, for incumbent workers, and a little bit for undergrads. We got word of a DoD grant that was coming through to expand an electronics program from California to other advanced manufacturing technologies, including integrated photonics. So we formed the Spark Photonics Foundation, 501c3 status, applied for this grant, and we were awarded as a subawardee for 3 years to stand up some programming based on the programming that was happening in electronics, but in our case for integrated photonics. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that programming. But that's really a long play, right? We're looking at middle schoolers, so that's awesome that you guys are volunteering in the middle school. We're looking at middle schools, we're looking at high schools, we've done some programming in community colleges, and now we're even getting into 5th grade and younger, especially targeting folks who are typically underrepresented in this field, right? Girls and women, underrepresented minorities. I think that there's a big opportunity there to expand the funnel into our industry. So I already talked about this quite a bit. I won't belabor it. This is the day I met my co-founder, Al. I'm down here in the left corner. This is the summer get together at MIT, and this is Al. MIT was hosting these in-person events to train people up on design, and we started there. Our first customer is in here somewhere in the upper left, Ben, and then our first engineer is in the upper right. We didn't actually all know each other at the time, but it's a small world, right? And this is kind of the good side, but it's also the bad side, because since it's so small, not a lot of people know about it, and that's where we're trying to raise awareness. Yes,
Going back on a previous slide just for a second,
absolutely.
my understanding is the only community college in Massachusetts that teaches optics technicians is right across the river from Springfield, Mass. I forget the name of it.
Springfield Technical Community.
Yeah, okay. Is that still true that there's only one community college teaching optical technicians in Massachusetts?
I would say yes, that's accurate. Springfield has a really strong program. But there are other programs like Quinsigamond Community College where they have a photonics program as well. We also work with Middlesex Community College. They don't have optics and photonics, but they have more kind of broad STEM and manufacturing. And so this is where, we're really seeing the opportunity, right, is to get those schools that are not thinking about optics and photonics to come into this world. North Shore Community College is trying to start some things too. So there's good motion in Massachusetts around it, but yeah, right now STIC is the leader. So this is our company, or I should say our companies right now. This is Spark Photonics. We run under the name Spark Photonics, but we're actually two legal entities. Our for-profit commercial services company is technically called Spark Photonics Design. We're a team of engineers, software, and photonic. And then we have Spark Photonics Foundation, our 501c3 nonprofit that does education and workforce development, where we're a team of primarily former educators, as well as some board members and a person in development. And then Al and I support both organizations. Al is basically an advisor, and I'm day-to-day on both companies. And this org chart, if you will, is depicted very, very purposely this way. So I've been in pretty much every role before this was the org chart is the other way, right? Where the CEO's at the top, and they're on top of everyone. They have people under them. It just makes my skin crawl. Big part of me wanting to start Spark, right? I said I wanted to do it because I felt like it should be done. I also felt like I had this opportunity to start a company that I could run in a way that I wanted a company to be run, that I wanted people to be treated. I've been treated pretty well at former jobs, and I love it, and I've been treated not so well, and that is the worst. I literally wake up feeling nauseated every day. So I've had 17 managers in my short career, 7 years between MIT and starting Spark, and so pretty good, I think, kind of overview of different management styles, and I try to take the best and roll that into Spark. So it's very kind of personally fulfilling for me to be able to start this company and try to give our employees an experience that I hope is the best one we ever have. All right, so what do we actually do? Spark's business, you can think about it in 3 lines. The first is our technical services. This is really why we were founded in the beginning, to do outsourced design and layout of PICs for other people. We very quickly got into PDK development. So remember a PDK, process design kit. It's that set of software files and documentation to be able to fabricate at a foundry. We got an SBIR award, Small Business Innovation Research Award, from the DoD in 2020 to develop a part of a PDK. It's called a component library. It's the components that we pre-design for other people, so they don't have to design it themselves. We design it once, fabricate it, get it measured, show that it works, and then other people can use it, so they don't have to design from scratch every time. So we got this SBIR award to do component library for Ames PDK. That opened up our business because until then we were kind of unknown. I actually was the only person working on it at the time, so I did all the PDK development myself, and that's how I learned design. Right? Since I've been a fab guy up until a year and a half after starting the company, I really didn't know what I was talking about. But then 6 months under this phase 1 SBIR, came out fairly knowledgeable, and we got brand recognition through the release of this at Ames. So that was really what kickstarted Spark Photonics, was the SBIR program. And then finally, we do quite a bit of consulting. Folks maybe like yourselves who aren't super familiar with PICs, but you're thinking, if I could get the size, weight, power, and cost of this system down by putting it on the surface of a chip, that might be really good for my business or for my customers. So we will work with people who have an idea that maybe works in PICs, and we'll do feasibility studies, help them understand, could it work? And then what we call supply chain coordination, figure out if you want to go ahead with this, where could you make it, where could you get it packaged, where could you get it tested, and how much would that cost and how long would it take? So that, remember I said in the beginning, we're in design, and that's at the start of the process. And so that really determines like these offerings are because we're kind of the front door to integrated photonics. So it's really, there's no minimum amount of hours or something you need to spend with us. We're willing to take the smallest jobs because we see this as our role. It's to build the integrated photonics ecosystem. And so we have to be really open to everybody. We have to be welcome.
That's another technical question. Do you do just pure integrated optics, such as, for example, on lithium niobate, or do you do it so that it can be combined with CMOS electronics, for example?
Yeah, great question. So we do mostly pure photonics. A lot of the folks who are doing integration with CMOS at this point are usually fairly mature in their design team and their process. So we don't get a lot of interest in that, honestly, coming through. A lot of what we do is things in like quantum, chemical and biological sensing, applications where it's a lot of optics driven and not very heavy on the electronic side. All right. I'm not gonna be too pedantic and step through this, but just to round it out, we recently, about a year ago, got into software. Everybody who does PIC design has to use software. And so we were using open source software for the first 3.5 years when I was the only employee. And then once we started scaling up, we started getting customers who want to go to different foundries. We realized this is not a scalable solution. We really need something that's kind of proven commercially that we can access a lot of different foundries with. So we started using Lucida's Photonics software and started talking to them about, they're based in Belgium, we're based in the United States. They wanted more of a presence here. We were using their software. We got kind of this voice of the customer thing. We were giving a lot of feedback. We started talking like, could we set up a one-stop shop for integrated photonics design, software and services? So a year ago, we announced this partnership where we are their official and exclusive North American sales and support channel for their software. So people can buy from us. If they submit a support ticket, it comes to us. And since we use the software every day, we know it pretty well. Then in the hardware side, we distribute some chips that were made at Photonics, very simple photonic chips mostly for training people, graduate students, for example, as well as even professionals. The Navy has bought from us to stand up some labs. Universities buy from us. We've had some industry folks buy from us to start labs. You just want 1 or 2 chips. So again, we're that front door. We're getting them the 1, the 2. They want to go to 20 or 50, they can do their own run. But 1 or 2, they come to us, and that's what we do. And then finally, our education outreach is done through our nonprofit, the Spark Photonics Foundation, where we run a couple different programs under the Spark Alpha and Spark Beta names. These are project-based learning programs for primarily middle school and high school students. This is actually out in Springfield. This is at Western New England University in partnership with Springfield Technical Community College, a group of students who ran through our program. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that program looks like. Just some quick examples of work we've done. The design and layout side. So this is what's called GDS file, the actual layout of a chip. These are array waveguide gratings to do MUX and DMUX for telecom datacom. In the middle, we've done PDK developments, a snapshot of the component library we currently have on offer, AIM Photonics, and we're going to have another one coming out hopefully tomorrow on another platform with AIM. And then finally, we do consulting. This is an example of a project with the University of Rochester we're doing right now through NIST to evaluate manufacturing variability in COVID sensors that they're making for the chip. So we work across all materials, as well as wavelengths all the way from visible to mid-IR. I wanted to just show you a little bit more on that COVID sensor because this is something we can talk about publicly that's really cool. So this is trying to make a very low cost, but I guess highly functional viral sensor, not even just COVID, but other viruses, HIV, HPV. The idea is that on this chip here, I don't know if folks online can see, but on this chip, you could drop saliva, let's say, into this little well. Through capillary action, it gets pulled over the surface of this is the chip. It's actually flipped upside down. So there's ring resonators on there that are doing the sensing action, and that gets pulled into this well, all through capillary action. So it's all passive. There's no pump or anything needed. And what you can get off this is data through the shift in the resonance of the rings, where you can find that if coronavirus that's specified you specify by functionalizing the ring with kind of different polymers, you can find that if you have coronavirus, you get this shift in the ring resonance. And if you don't have it, you get no shift. And this x-axis is minutes. So after 1 minute, it's very clear if someone's positive. Whereas right now, right, you take a COVID test, you're waiting 15 minutes. And here we can get a slope. The slope is the speed with which that resonance is shifting. So you can now also tell how positive are you. So are you maybe coming back to kind of stabilizing. So this is, we think, really cool example of the power of integrated photonics. You can multiplex this, so you can do not just one, we could do up to 16 on a chip. So we could have all the variants of COVID detected. We could have different variants of common cold, for example. So very powerful kind of platform to test for viruses.
Do you have to do major changes to the resonance structure for when you vary from virus to virus?
Yeah, good question. So the way that you actually vary from virus to virus is not by the photonic structure itself, but it's by the functionalization on top. Microprint fluidic on top,
Okay.
and then that's functionalized with an antigen specific kind of functionalization. So you flow the sample, the serum over that, and anything that is specific to that will stick. The evanescent field from the light propagating underneath then sees those things sticking to it, and you get the shift in the ring resonance just for that specific sensor. So it's all because of that functionalization.
So it's just the antigens you change.
So your antibody functionalizing,
Yes, antibody functionalization.
and you have a fluorophore on them, or it's just a change in the resonance?
You probably want to speak up. I'm not sure anyone else.
Oh,
can hear
I'm
you.
sorry, I asked if it was just an antibody, and you said yes. And then I asked if it was, you put a fluorophore on sometimes, so you're detecting light as opposed to just a resonance in the change in the resonance.
It's just the changes in resonance.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you. Okay.
So can you humor, I'm a total pick beginner. Is this getting some external power? You put it into a box that
Yeah.
reads it? Like,
Right.
how does this work?
Thanks, I skimmed over that. Yeah, so this would be a card that is then inserted into a reader. The reader puts the light into and out of the PIC. So there's kind of like a permanent box, right? You can imagine having it at home. And then this card is meant to be about 10 cents. And you could then, put your sample in, insert it, wait a minute, get a reading out, you toss the card, put your next one in. I love it. I've shown this slide a lot of times. I've never gotten these questions. This is great. I get jazzed with
Tell
this.
us we
This is
were
awesome.
not.
Yeah, you guys aren't sleeping out here. All right. Just a couple more things. These are our education chips that we sell. This is Steve Adamczyk out of Western New England University. So these are very simple PIC chips. This is actually an optical microscopy image of our kind of most advanced one, if you will. It's the one with the most functionality. And so Steve was a pioneer in getting these for his lab, training students out there in Western New England University. And since then, the program has grown quite a bit. We're hoping to release another set of chips very soon. And these are some really nice shots of students who have participated in our program, Spark Alpha. This is our project-based learning for high school and middle school students. And we've put over 500 students through the program so far. We just got a DoD grant 6 months ago to expand the program nationwide. In this program, our teachers, our staff, facilitate the program in classrooms with students. But we realize that that's, of course, very limited in its scalability. We have to actually drive everywhere. So if we want to expand this outside our driving radius, we have to figure out a way to get it to students outside Massachusetts. And we thought maybe we could do it over Zoom. We got very clear feedback from teachers and students. We don't want to be taught via Zoom, right? So what we landed on is a train the teacher model where we train the teachers via Zoom. They can usually put up with a couple hours over the course of a couple of weeks. We train them, we give them all of our digital materials, which includes videos and presentations and handouts and worksheets and workbooks. They get all that material. They also get a site license then to run it in perpetuity for no fee, no additional fee. Initially, it's funded under our grant. They get to run it forever. And then they also get to participate in professional development opportunities with our staff. And we stood up an online community of practice for them to all be able to connect with each other. So this is now being run in Springfield. It's also being run in Lowell. And we're expanding it throughout Massachusetts over the next year and a half under the grant. And then finally, we're expanding outside Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. You're working where on the secondary and middle school level primarily?
We're all the way down to fifth grade right now.
Okay.
Fifth grade through 12th. We've done some work with first year college students at North Shore Community College and Middlesex Community College as well. So we really think the bread and butter is actually we're writing an IEEE paper for a presentation in August out at WNE at the conference out there about really trying to focus at the earlier ages, because what we see even in high school, students have kind of separated into like, I'm a STEM person or I'm kind of not a STEM person. And we think that catching them earlier is really the crux to getting them on a path to pursue these kinds of.
So you're doing this to, for teaching, and then you would have kits that the students will be able to work with. I'm just interested. I've written for middle school. It's about optics, and I write about optics.
I know, I read your comments.
Yeah. And it's it's an interesting thing, but I haven't really done much with that, and I'm just curious now what's going on, because there's certainly a lot more optics than I wrote a book for middle school back around 1990. So that would be,
Wow.
You might have been in the audience then.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
It's
That's great. You're a
there's
pioneer.
lots of interesting things to do.
Yeah, we give the teachers a kit. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to provide a link to a video. I made a 7-minute video of the demo that we do in class, and now that we're asking teachers to do. There's a commercial off-the-shelf kit. It's called Light Modulator Kit. It hooks up to your phone or what have you, electronic device. You can play audio through it. It actually amplitude modulates the flashlight, just an LED flashlight.
Okay.
And then there's a receiver with a solar cell and a speaker, and you can play your voice. I play the students' voices, right? Have them record, play it over the flashlight. It kills them. Like, you can send information with light. So that's how we start talking about the internet working. You can send information with light. Most people are like, what does that mean? So then we do the demo. This is the internet. And then we say, wouldn't it be great to shrink this down so you can make all this in the power of a chip for things like sensing? And then we get into integrated photonics. So we provide that commercial package, that modulator kit to teachers.
Yeah, I saw there was a group, and I forget the name now, that it was doing a spectroscopy kit. It was just more for science hobbyists than anything else, but they had, you were using a fluorescent, compact fluorescent bulbs to get narrow spectral lines and things like this. So, there's lots of other things too.
Yeah.
This will be, there's a lot of interesting possibilities too. And playing with light does have a magic to it.
Absolutely.
For some kids, that's how I got here,
A lot of us, I think, yeah. David.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, so if I start to slur them, stop me. So I'm familiar with ASIC design from 20 plus years ago when I did that stuff, but it sounds like, and in the ASIC world, there are two standard languages. If you go out to fab, it was either Verilog or VHDL, which was developed by the Defense Department. It sounds like you've developed or you're in the process of developing a standardized language. That's what this PDK is. But what I'm confused about is, it sounds like you said you were the exclusive rep, North American rep for Lucida Photonics. Is this a language? Could somebody else come in and generate a PIC compiler or whatever the analog to the Verilog VHDL world is for photonics? I'm confused.
No, both good questions. I can scroll back to this a little bit. So I guess to differentiate between the PDK and what Lucida is. PDK really is, so we would use Lucida software to develop a PDK. Lucida software is all programmed in Python. So the users use it in Python, I should say. So the language is Python, but then it's basically a scripted language to be able to define what's going to go onto the chip. We then provide the components that were made using that language in the PDK to users. as well as some of the data that's generated from it in what's called a compact model. So you could take that component, put it into a circuit using the software, a circuit schematic, and then run a simulation on it and see if I put this, range of wavelengths into this device, what can I expect to get out? So the PDK is kind of it's not a language, it's a collection of files that have been generated for the purpose of enabling designers to make PICs. Lucida Photonics makes the software that you use to actually make those initial designs to put in the PDK.
So it's
Is that clear?
building blocks, and the kit allows them to rearrange the building blocks in whatever way they want.
But when you go out to fab, like, how do you sort of go from the PDK, the simulation, to the actual layout? Like, the chip in the ASIC world, there was a whole tape out thing where there were specialized designers that worried about, how you actually get in and out of the IO pin, hundreds of IO pins on the chip. There has to be an analogous thing for photonics. Is that
That's what we do.
standardized?
That's what we do. Yeah. No, so in photonics, there is not a lot of standardization. As far as IO, optical IO, there are some standard pitches, spacings of edge or surface couplers. But the rest of it's kind of free range.
So if you go between fab houses, like, do you have to redo?
It's
your
usually not
tape?
portable. Yeah, there are things that need to be redone. Yeah, and most different foundries have different processes. There might be some standard layer thicknesses like silicon, usually 220 nanometers, but everything else could be custom, and it's very hard to port a design from one foundry to another. All right, this is my last thing about what we do. So this is the model I just described to you, the trainer teacher model. I'm picking up our instructor, Vanessa. So she's now training K-14 teachers who are teaching students. And so we're planning to expand this across the US. So my ask to you is, if you have any connections in schools who might be interested in implementing this program, or in industry or education who might be interested in being partners. The students take virtual or in-person field trips to education and industry partners. So STIC, WNE are partners of ours, WPI, right, next month, QCC. Students visit these places, they learn about education pathways in STEM and ideally in photonics if the school has the program. And then they also visit virtually or in person industry partners to learn about career opportunities there. So I would love to hear from you if you know some folks who might be interested in this. Okay, so this is really the I guess getting into the crux of the talk, talking about first some hiring insights that I guess I'd like to get across. Now, I don't know if everybody here is going to be looking for a job, but I think all of us at some point have, and it's pretty common that you're going to, so hopefully this is still useful to everybody. So I think the first thing that I think about if I were in a candidate's shoes is looking at the culture. How are people treated? You can't really ask this bluntly. You could in an interview, but of course, everybody's treated great all the time, right? So ways to ask this kind of thing are more about, like, if you're concerned about, say, having the flexibility to work from home, which was a big consideration for me with 2 small kids, right? What is your work from home policy? And kind of digging into that a little bit might open up a little bit of information about how they treat their people. What's your vacation policy? At Spark, we don't track vacation. We don't track sick days. We don't try to micromanage people's business. If they want to take off, as long as everybody's kind of got their work set, we're good. So, that kind of level of structure might not be good for some people. So asking about these kinds of policies, usually if there's policies that you can ask about, that will give you some insight into the culture. This is a common one that we run into with candidates who they come in and they want the exact right job, especially right out of school. It's got to be exactly what I want to do. And unfortunately, I had to let a candidate go who seemed great on paper, and then he wants to do all research. So, we don't do much research, but think about where could this lead to? It's not necessarily the end position you're going to be in, right? It's common today that people move roles. I don't have the expectation that anybody who's a Spark employee today is going to be a Spark employee for the rest of their lives. In fact, I want to encourage them to go into other pursuits and be successful there, because I think that's good for the industry. It's good for our business and we have good alumni out in the ecosystem. So think about where your next move could lead you. And then considering the sustainability of the position, does this position look like it can last? Does this organization look like it can last? Because we've actually recently seen a lot of organizations that didn't last, or positions that didn't last, right? A lot of layoffs in tech recently, from companies where people thought they had landed a pretty good job. So this is an actual example. We were looking for candidates. We were looking to hire in California. So I went to Glassdoor and did some research. What can I expect to be paying somebody? Okay, this is kind of the range I'd expect. And then we started talking to candidates, and there were a couple where it was like the upper range busted out of this box, and it was like way up there, and then some.
That was what they.
That was what they were asking for. Sorry, yeah. And I was just like, wait, what? I mean, are you? This is like more than twice what everyone else is expecting. By the way, I always ask, I do all the first round interviews for our company. I ask at the end, what are you expecting for base salary? It's kind of a good measure, make sure we're not going to have any surprises, right? Like Steve Harvey's surprise there. We're just not going to move forward. I don't want to waste your time or ours. But then it's also an interesting measure of how comfortable are candidates putting a number out there. I actually value when someone can say, I think the range that you have in the posting is fine, or I want at least 120K. I think I'm worth it for these reasons. It shows they were prepared. Someone kind of hems and haws. I feel like maybe they don't know what they're worth. The interesting part, all these people who wanted high salaries had recently been laid off. That's why they were looking for jobs. Yeah, so from very large, very, very large public companies that we all use almost every day, they've been laid off. So yeah, you got a 500K comp package, but you only lasted 3 months, and now you're back on the market. Is it really worth it for that? So I kind of coach people, if you are getting an offer and it seems like, wow, this is ridiculously high, it's probably not you, unless you're really that good. They're probably offering really high comp packages to a lot of people, and that should be a red flag to you as a candidate. If they're giving high salaries to everybody well above market, that company might not last, or that role might not last. All right. This might not be a shocker to anyone, but really, I think if I had to boil down to 2 things that companies look for, it's the resume, obviously, that gets you in the door, that's table stakes, and then the attitude. We've had some really highly qualified candidates who come through and the interview is just a dud, like not enthusiastic. And I think I could probably make the generalization that most small companies that are ambitious want people excited about their jobs. So that's why I do all the first round interviews, because I kind of have a good idea of what I really want the attitude in our company to be. And if that doesn't come through in the interview, let's not waste each other's time. I had to fake it when I was in insurance. I had to fake I was excited about insurance. But the way I faked it was being actually excited about the role itself, the work to be done, right? Process engineering. I love that at Intel. Didn't love insurance. Actually loathe insurance. But I loved process engineering. I loved fixing little issues. And so when I went to interview at Liberty, that's what got me excited. And it was a really good role. It was a great learning experience. I learned more about lean manufacturing at Liberty Mutual than I did at Intel. So,
I have kind of a related question, if I can formulate it well, which you say experience. But what I often try to tell people, or I have difficulty in when I was at the stage of looking
Can you
for a
speak up,
job,
Amy?
is how does your experience relate to what they need as an employee? Because they're not making devices, they're not putting down germanium on amorphous silicon or running a fab, but you had skills that went into their job. And how do you put that on a piece of paper that actually gets noticed these days? If it's an employer, if it's the employer's market, they're often looking for somebody that exactly matches what they think they have in mind.
yeah, it's something that we've struggled with. How much do we try to find someone that we can plug and play with, and how much do we bring in someone that's really got that awesome attitude. That's actually something we're struggling with right now as we grow. What I can say is we do not require, education degrees of any sort for our positions, because I feel like if somebody came to us and had awesome experience that was in line with what we're looking for and the right attitude, and they had a high school diploma, no problem. We actually, one of our engineers has a high school diploma, college degree, one of our software engineers. And she's fantastic. She has great attitude and she's really fast smart. So yeah, I think it's a mistake when you're looking for that unicorn as an employer, but I understand why some people think they can put that out there.
So what did she put on a resume that you actually interviewed her?
Okay, so her position, this position was posted on Indeed. We got 84 applicants. We gave applicants the option to submit a video interview. I wrote 3 questions. It's like, well, let's see if anyone does this. Kind of just boring questions, like this is to hire for a Python focused program, a position. So like, what interests you about Python programming? I thought I'd get maybe kind of lame responses, but she was one of 2 out of 84 candidates who submitted a video. The first one was kind of what I expected, just staring at the camera and saying, Python's, I've been doing it since I was 7, it's really nice. And then she came on with like 2-minute answers, very well thought out, very like inspiring responses to the 3 questions. It was more than I expected when I was writing them that any candidate would ever respond to. So got the interview, got the job. And she was on paper definitely not the most qualified. It's also very important to me, you probably could tell this, to keep diverse talent in the field. So I was really hoping that I encourage more women and minorities to apply, and when I see them coming through, I always try to do my best to make sure they get the fair shake. And she blew it away.
I'm curious how wide a range of applicants you get in terms of, you talked about the 2 people who sent their video interviews, and there was one and one real hot one. And I did, when I was on the staff at Laser Focus World, I did hire, was involved in a couple cycles of hiring people, and I found that we get a lot. This was in the 70s, and we got lots of applicants because of the job market, and there were a few that just stood out. I remember one who was still a friend today. It was I've written for him, and he used to write for me, and he just stood out among all the others, and he was right out of UMass. It just and other people, you see people who came in with a degree in a PhD in English literature. And what that she thought she was going to get a job as a laser magazine. It was, I don't know.
Yeah, we get all kinds, we get like janitors applying for integrated photonics engineers positions. So yeah, a lot of those 84, right? Not all of them qualified on paper, for sure. It is kind of a wild market out there on LinkedIn and Indeed. But you pretty quickly weed through. So that's why I put experience first, right?
Yeah.
See a custodian, probably not moving on to it first.
Well, he made telescope. He was making telescopes in the basement. Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's what you had. That's
And
what he
you
would.
put that in.
He should come in and say, "Look, I built these telescopes all by myself."
Integrated photonic telescopes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna skip over this because I wanted to make sure we get to this part. So I had some thoughts that I want to share about starting and running a photonics company here in the last 10 minutes. So there's more to tech than just tech. Somebody said it when we were having dinner, right? A lot of this is people. The attitude, right? That's people. When I was working at Intel, I was a tool owner. I was owning atomic layer deposition machinery. But the vast majority of my work was working with people, scheduling, problem solving. This is all people, communicating to other people about, and convincing them too about what we should do. So I think that sometimes gets overlooked, and that's something we try to impart to our students in our Spark Alpha program. The big wins are built from the small wins. When I started Spark, our first customer, if you will, was the Navy, Naval Research Lab. We did a layout for them in Foundry in Europe for free. because I didn't know what I was talking about. I figured I'll do this for free. We could at least get the Navy to say like, good job, maybe this works. And then that blossomed the next year into our SBIR, worked with them, and now we're on many different projects with them through the government to develop processes at AIM Photonics. So, that was just a small win. It was kind of willing to admit, like, be very humble. Right? Didn't know what I was talking about. Gonna do it for free. If you'd be willing to have me, and they were. And I think sometimes we see small companies or startups in news who like kind of hit it big. They get a huge funding round, and these kinds of things don't come overnight. I think it's easy to kind of you see these headlines and think like, oh, that just happened, but it's probably a lot of very small wins and steps along the way. And then finally, let go of the good to pursue the great. This is all about focus. I learned that very acutely in many instances. But how many things we could go after, right, Jeff? Like, there's so many kits we could be offering to students. There's so many things, cool things we could be showing them in Spark Alpha. But you have to make it fit in the time allotted, and we have to make our own jobs fit into the time we have as humans. So, really focus, I would say, is the number one trait of a startup company as a whole, not just the founders, but the entire company needs to learn how to focus. Our team, I think, too, has done, I would say, a very good job recently at weeding out not just lack of focus, but kind of extraneous activities that we realize could be made better. We're doing a lot of internal automation. We're adjusting our roles pretty much weekly to fit in different places so we can maximize our efficiency. And so we went from 1 person full-time to 5 people full-time in 2023, give or take a month. And since then, we're just holding it because really, I feel like when you grow that fast, if you will, percentage-wise, there's a lot of problems that can get covered up. And so I hear about companies, like a candidate told me they were also interviewing a company in California that had grown from 25 people to 150 people in the past year. Like, wow, that sounds like amazing growth. I wonder what kinds of problems they have, because I can't imagine that everything's smooth when you added that many people that fast. It's really easy to throw people at problems, but the problems are still there. So we're really trying to take a pause in 2024 and make our business much more efficient. We're actually focusing on profitability. This is not because we're greedy, obviously we want to make a profit. It's because we want to be able to have a cushion now so that when times get tough, because we know they will, we want to be able to survive this tough times. So we want to make sure that we're not kind of running at break even. We want to be able to make a nice profit when we can, when times are relatively good, so that when the bad times come, we can survive. I've been coached by multiple people saying, when you're in growth mode, you just want to break even. It's all about top line growth, right? Revenue growth. But I think that, especially for a company like ours, where we're not looking to hockey stick some kind of product, it's really important to have profitability to be able to weather this time. We're totally bootstrapped. I don't think I mentioned that. We're bootstrapped. Al and I are the only owners in the business. So we're able to call our own destiny, which I think it's hard in the beginning because we didn't have a huge infusion of funding. I couldn't hire anyone. I had to do it myself. But once you get the ball rolling, it's really nice to have the luxury of being able to determine your own destiny.
Are you, the obvious question, are you giving any kind of stock to employees? I mean, you've heard this 1,000 times.
I appreciate the question. Yeah. So do we compensate employees with stock? We do not. And it's not, again, because we're greedy. There's a lot of things I have to say that could probably go beyond the time here. I'll just say that a lot of the stock incentive plans that people are offered, I think, have incentives for employees and the company that are at odds, especially when it's vested. Because then you're holding someone for time because their wallet says they should stay. But I tell our employees, if your heart says you should go, I want you to go. And I want to help you be successful when you go. I don't want your wallet to be saying, I should stay, and your heart saying I should go. Because then you're probably not going to be productive. Pretty sure you're not going to be happy. I had that situation before with some bonuses that were going to vest. I don't really want our employees to live through that. So we just compensate with cash. Another good reason to be profitable. Pay them a fair salary, give bonuses when we can, when we have a good year. And we retain ownership of, Al and I have the ownership of the company. We don't have to do a whole cap table. We don't have to get valued. We don't have to worry about people wanting us to be sold or IPO because they want their stock options to be worth something. So it just kind of simplifies life. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
In regards to the last bullet, how much is what your like company is doing now? How much of that, how closely does that compare to kind of your original vision for it? And how much did you have to pivot to like kind of change where you went?
Yeah, great question. Going back to the kind of 3 lines of business we had at the beginning, our original vision was just to do design and layout. So we haven't really pivoted, we've just expanded beyond that to have a wider scope. And I feel much more comfortable with where we are now. We can support customers not only in the design, but then if they want to take the design work in-house, we can support them with the software. We still make a portion, we make a commission on the software, recurring license fees. So still financially incentivized to help them. And then we're able to stay close to them and kind of make sure that, you know, they can take it and run with it beyond our help. So, yeah, not really any pivot, but just expansion. Yes.
I have a kind of question around the hiring thing. I mean, it's kind of an interesting one because you're probably the pool of people and the people who are super excited and interested is bigger when you don't set like a threshold on a particular degree. But at the same time, like, you know, for something as, I guess photonics is still not standardized. You still need to do a lot of design. Don't you need like people with very specific expertise? Because design is arguably the most important part of doing photonics because you can get it wrong and then all the time and money you spend in manufacturing, you get a terrible result, it's gone basically, right? So how do you kind of balance that? Like, don't you need to hire people who have PhDs and postdocs? And I speak this from a company that I was part of that was exclusively all postdocs.
Okay, so we need to hire people who have the experience we need and who have the attitude we want. Whether they have a postdoc, PhD, undergrad degree, we don't care.
But still need to have the experience to do that
The
work.
vast majority of them will have those degrees because that at least is how the industry currently is. But what we really want to do is get it to a place where it's kind of a democratized design, democratized photonics, where you don't need to have an advanced degree to do this work. Make it easier for people. We think that's how the industry grows. So we want to set that trend right now, but not requiring those degrees.
Yeah. And so then the side question is, for me, I was wondering, like, because there's such, for me, it feels like the threshold to kind of do work at that level is so high that you have to go do all these PhD in physics. I myself did PhD in physics, right?
Okay.
And then you look at kids who, talking about the kids in middle school, like you go and teach them about photonics. Whereas instead there are other alternatives, like they go learn about software and they can continually engage. Like how do those kids continually engage in photonics over the period of their whole education to get to that point where now they can start having an impact or be involved in the field?
It's a really good question. It is something that we're honestly struggling with right now. As our programming, by the way, does not teach anything about the science or math behind photonics. It's very high level. But then we actually started Spark Beta, which is now a follow-on to Spark Alpha that gets them into Python programming and doing drag and drop layout. It's in PowerPoint. It's not real layout. But then the next step is to get them actually into Python scripting for layout. And that's something that's kind of on our radar, and we're working with some folks to evaluate options there. So we're building out a pipeline of that. And then through folks like AIM Photonics, edX out of University of British Columbia, there are like 6-week courses where you actually do a full design, layout, and tape out. So there's kind of like that far into the spectrum, and we're at the beginning, and we're trying to fill in the gap in between.
Exactly, yeah. Because the one-off that, you know, then the next time you'll probably do it is like once you're done with your PhD.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow into your question. I have 2 questions, actually. One's directed to the education, one's directed to your building the PICs. From a California perspective, as a counterpoint to the Massachusetts information about, education, I think Pomona College, which is right next to Caltech, has a tech program for optics for kind of like technicians. UCI, University of California, Irvine also has something too. Is the program that you're talking about layout, is that for technicians or is that for like engineers? Like what level of education, fills that, picks up on, it gets the training for layouts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Training for layouts would be usually more of an engineering role. We have a layout engineer who does the majority of our layouts. And in the case of Spark Beta, our program that we're offering, that's more like a high school level.
Right.
So we're trying to get students at that point interested in not just photonics, but really semiconductors more broadly, because what we do with photonics is very applicable to electronics as well. So get them interested, and then the idea is that they pursue this in college and eventually come out as maybe designers, maybe something else in semiconductors, maybe something else in manufacturing. We're kind of okay with all of it, but that's the vision.
And then I guess, and so do they, like for the children, is it kind of like, is it Scratch or there's some like kind of a programming thing that's kind of graphical? Is that what you kind of use?
Yeah, right now we're just having them go into Google Colab and move around some Python code. And then we have them do a little, like, this is what Python does. They actually draw an emoji with the Python. And then we put them into just a PowerPoint slide online where they have waveguides and some sensor devices. They actually make one of those COVID sensor chips just graphically by dragging and dropping waveguides, which are just lines, and sensors, which are circles, and they put them together and they route the lines to the circles and then off the chip. So they're doing layout light. And then the next idea is to use like drag and drop functionality in K layout, or now there's a graphical user interface in Lucida's software. So they could actually drag and drop and make a real schematic and then export that to code in Lucida and actually come up with real code. That's the next step.
Okay, so
We're not there yet.
one quick question on the building of the chip. If you have 2 students or something like this at one of these schools, Boston U, MIT, who want to do a startup and they want to put it on a PIC, what kind of investment are they looking at? You know, is it a $10,000, $100,000 do they have to raise to, do 2 prototypes or something like that? Is it still
super dependent on what it is? Yeah. We've had people tape out a chip for a couple $1,000s. There's a foundry up in Canada that does electron beam lithography. You can get a chip for a couple K. If you can design yourself, that's your time plus that. If you want to go fab it somewhere like Global Foundries, it's probably $250,000 for one. So very, very, very wide range.
Thanks.
And you had a question, and Dan's arm's gonna fall off, so I'll get to you next. And then, yeah, was it Audrey or Ashley?
Audrey.
Audrey.
Oh, I thought you were going.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up for it. I just wanted.
Mine's quick.
Okay.
So I'm really interested in your outreach. I'm sure you're familiar with the statistic about the drop off of women in STEM. It's around like middle school, where they're never even going to pursue something technical, and that is far earlier than men and minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious what you're doing to kind of address that and reach that audience.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is something we feel very passionately about. When we adopted this program from California, it was squarely targeted at high school students, as explicitly as a recruitment program into community colleges, because that's also a population that we don't talk about a lot about, is getting students into community colleges instead of 4-year institutions. So that was how it was handed to us. And then we very quickly realized exactly what you're saying. We need to go earlier. I coached at the time, my son's 3rd grade first robotics
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
class, and that 5 boys, 1 girl. Right? So it's like, yeah, there's already decisions being made. It's just very hard to get girls, even in the 3rd grade, interested in doing first. So the program has to look a lot different for a 5th grader than it does for a senior in high school. So it's just taking us time to make sure that we feel comfortable with how the program is being tailored to those younger grades. We're down to 5th grade now, and hoping to get even younger. But it's again that kind of that focus thing, right? Let go of the good to pursue the great. How much can our staff handle tailoring it down that far versus how much opportunity do we have right now to start rolling this out nationwide in the form that it's in? So we think there's somewhere in there we're able to do what we've been doing and still continue to move down to younger students. Hope that helps.
Cool.
Okay, good. Yeah, Daniel.
So somebody's identified, there's been a big push for STEM. Somebody says, oh, PICs, this is the future. We want people to be interested in going into this, right? When the time is right for them, college, whatever it is, graduate programs. Like, we see several talks here on PICs, and it's a lot of like graduate level, research level, like, when is it going to be ready for the market? And are there programs actually ready, or are there people working on actually developing the program, so if there's people interested, they have a place to go into to learn and to actually, get into the field.
Yeah, thank you. That was what we were doing at AIM Academy at MIT, was trying to make those programs. So there's a whole portfolio of programs now through edX, online platform, to learn PIC design and about fabrication as well. It was kind of pioneered by Lucas Krostowski at University of British Columbia, and now folks like Stefan Preble at RIT have taken up the charge to fill in those gaps, and folks at MIT as well. Niels Bogrovich at UU. So yeah, that's being built out. But you're right, PICs have kind of been like this thing for a long time. It got started in telecom datacom. I got into the field in 2005 when I started my doctorate. It was like, it's gonna be the next big thing. And here we are 19 years later, it's like, it's gonna be the next big thing. But it is a big thing in telecom datacom, but then these other applications, it's kind of like it's looking for the right application, but we keep coming up with new applications where it could be the right thing. Quantum, AI, right? These are areas that continue to be developed. We're seeing a lot of interest in quantum, a lot of interest in thin film lithium niobate. So, I think it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of engineering to get these processes and platforms ready. I still think that there is going to be that kind of watershed moment. We want to be sure that we're ready for it. Henry, you had something.
I guess this is a question about the economies of scale when it comes to design in integrated photonics.
Okay.
At least in compared with electronics, where there are, after the last 50 years, there are certain architectures that are established, and that you can build EDA software around them that lots of people can learn, and that you can abstract away a lot of the analog stuff, and even a lot of the digital stuff.
IP blocks.
Where photonics still, it's obviously a very analog process. And it seems like it is just a zoo of ASICs, right? And I mean, is there a path towards some kind of centralization where one design software can actually service a large part of the market, and it makes sense for a community college or even MIT to teach, one EDA software, right? Can you see a path towards that, or can you even imagine us going? It requires some kind of architecture that deserves that, right?
Yeah, I guess I would be concerned if there were one EDA software that had everything.
Or
what I mean? Like,
one or two handfuls that
Yeah.
that kind of capture that scale.
Yeah, right now it is still kind of the Wild West. There's companies out there that are trying to develop IP blocks. This is actually my last point. Thank you for that. Business model innovation is underrated in tech. So this was, Henry, kind of to your point, I think, when we started Spark, we were doing this PDK component library development for AIM Photonics. Every single advisor that I have a number from MIT, I have friends who started companies. Everybody said when you're developing these components for AIM PDK, you should charge a licensing fee if anyone wants to use it. And Al and I felt like this is the wrong thing for the industry because it's so nascent. We hit people with, you want to use our IP, you got to pay for it right up front. That's gonna stymie the use of these devices. So there are companies out there who are trying to get people to pay license fees for very small pieces of IP that are really, I would say, not even worth trying to license, the headache of trying to license something. And other people are trying to make circuits. I think the industry is in a place right now where people feel like, there's maybe some not invented here syndrome, right? Like, why is yours better than what I can develop? The foundries are all different. So what you have an IP in one foundry in Europe probably couldn't be used in a foundry in the United States just because of the difference in process. So it doesn't translate. So I think there's still just a lot of hurdles to that. When we started Spark 2, the world was awash in NDAs and licensing agreements and all this paperwork. Like, the tech was okay, but the paperwork was getting in everyone's way. 60-page agreements to just get access to look at a PDK, let alone to actually use the thing. So I think there's still a lot of room that we have to bring down those barriers. And Al and I said when we started Spark, we want to be easy to do business with, I've never redlined an NDA once. I always ask for someone else's NDA so we can get it, unless there's something really egregious, which I've never seen. Like, we're okay with it. We're not gonna spend time bouncing back and forth with lawyers and all that. So to your point, I think that there are a lot of people thinking about how we could get kind of larger IP blocks that could be more established and easily kind of drag and drop in place. But right now, things are so custom, both at the process level and the design level. It's just very hard to standardize. I don't see in the near term a real good outlook for that kind of IP standardization. Yeah. Yes, Josh.
We have a question from the chat.
Oh, sweet.
Jocelyn asks, what was your biggest challenge when starting Spark Photonics?
Biggest challenge. All right. Well, so I actually started both Sparks at the same time, so I can talk about both at once. The biggest challenge was that I had a pretty nice job at MIT. I had wanted to go to MIT since I was in 7th grade. And I went there for 10 years, undergrad and grad, then I worked there. So it was like, this is kind of like what I've wanted ever since I was 12. And then this thing came up, right? And I said, like, I felt like it was my duty to start this company, but it also was like my childhood dream to be at MIT. And literally my birthday, Cinco de Mayo, 2019, I had 2 months left at MIT before I was going to leave, settle on an end date. And I remember going out to dinner with my wife and literally crying over my quesadilla because I was so scared about leaving MIT and going out on my own. I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay myself a salary. I really didn't for the first 3 years. And it was just really scary. So I think it was getting over, it was getting over that fear of leaving something that was very familiar that I wanted for a long time and going into something that was completely unknown. Best job I ever had. In retrospect, it's really a really good decision. I still miss MIT. I try to get back there, but I love this thing.
Like, do you have a lot more?
No, this is a
There's
big
probably.
So I do some amount of outreach development for NES-Optica and a few other things. It takes a lot of work. It's a huge amount of investment and time, especially to get to the level you've got. You're also starting a startup. How did you possibly have the time and bandwidth to do both of those at once? And what convinced you as a startup that you were the right people to do the sort of the educational outreach?
Yeah, starting 2 companies at the same time, I'm not sure I would advise it. Maybe unless you're Elon Musk, and I'm definitely not. It was really lucky that we had 2020 where we did the PDK development for AIM under SBIR. That ended late 2020, then 2021, we ramped up the work on this grant with the DoD to start Spark Alpha. So the two kind of oscillated and my capacity was not overrun. Now we're at a place where it's like both of these are kind of on, they're kind of like rockets. I imagine 1 foot strapped to each rocket. And they started off in the same direction. Now they're kind of not diverging, but they're taking off separately. They're each their own thing. And for a while I could straddle the two, but now it's getting to a place where, like, if I continue this, I'm probably going to get ripped in half. So ended up hiring Bob Vino, our first employee ever, was actually with the foundation. He's been great. He's our manager over there. So he really runs the day to day. I'm more kind of like in the background with, contracts and biz dev, and only spend a couple hours a week at the foundation. So really now my time is mostly on the design side. But in the beginning, it was very much back and forth between the two, and just happenstance that I was able to do both. I asked my wife about how available I am for family activities. Something I'm working on.
I think we're just about out of time, but I just want to say thank you again for round of applause.
I want to give this plug for next month. This is the talk at WPI. It's joined between NES-Optica and IMAPS New England. So Doug is a great partner of ours. He's the head of the Department of Physics at WPI. He and a couple other folks from there are going to be giving tours of the lab. You're actually going to see some of our chips. Our chips are being used by WPI to do student theses. Some students are measuring those for their theses. So it'd be great to see you out there able to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.